Okay, so the reason I put this video together is reductions are not covered on MathsWatch. So if something has been reduced or a number has been reduced and you have to find out what the original number was, then it's not covered. So I need to do this because inevitably it will come up in an exam. Okay, and people do tend to have problems with this. So if you can do it, fine. If you can't, then hopefully I'll be able to help you. Okay, so we've got a jacket that's been reduced by 20% and now costs 160 quid. We've got to find out what was the original cost. So what we know is this, that £160, if the jacket has been reduced by 20%, then the £160 is 80% of the original price, because 20% from 100 gives us 80%. Okay, 100% being the original cost. So if £160 equals 80%, then how can we use this to find out the original cost? And it really is this simple. What I do is I divide by 8 because it's 80%. If I divide 160 by 8, that will give me 10% of the original cost. Okay, and I'll show it to you. So we've got 160 divided by 8, which we know is 20. Okay, so 20 is 10% of the original cost. Now we like 10% because if I multiply this by 10, I get 100%. So 20 multiplied by 10 gives me £200. So that is the original cost. Okay, now just to prove that it works, if the original cost was £200 and we reduce it by 20%, well, 10% of 200 is 20. So 20%, which is what the reduction was, is going to be 40. So if I take 40 from 200, I do get 160. So I know my answer's right. So what we need to do is find out what percentage the amount represents so that we can find 10%. Okay, so if I just change this slightly, okay, and we say, okay, a jacket costs whatever it is and it's been reduced by 30% and it's now £210. So this 210 is 30% from 100% is 70%. So the £210 is 70% of the original cost. So again, I divide by 7 to find 10%. So 210 divided by 7. So I can see that that goes 30. So 30 represents 10% of the original price. So to find 100%, I just multiply this by 10, because 10% is 100%. So 30 multiplied by 10 gives me £300. Okay, and that's the original price. Okay, so it really is that simple. Okay, to do it another way, I've seen students do it in lots of different ways, and they come up with weird figures. It's £301.42. So it will always at GCSE come out to a nice, reasonable figure, usually. Okay, but the key is finding what percentage represents that amount. Then use that to find 10%, and then you're off and running. Okay, so I'm just going to pause the video for a second. Okay, so the reason I paused it is because if we get fractional amounts, we do it in an almost identical way. So a jacket has been reduced in the sale by a quarter. Okay, so it doesn't have to be a jacket reduced in the sales. They might say that petrol in the car has been reduced by a quarter. It could be anything. Okay, but if we get a reduction of some sort, then it's always done this way. So if the jacket's been reduced by a quarter and now costs £90, how much was the cost originally? Well, we do the same as we did before. So 90, if it's been reduced by a quarter, then that 90 represents 3/4 of the original price. That makes sense to me. So what I need to do is find out what 1/4 of the price, the original price, was. So because we've got 3/4, we divide it by the top of the fraction, okay, what we call the numerator. So 90 divided by 3 gives us 30. Okay, so that equals 1/4 of the original price. So if 30 equals 1/4 of the original price, and I know there's 4 quarters in one, then 30 multiplied by 4 gives me £120. So the original cost was £120. Now, just to prove it's true, if they've reduced, if the jacket costs £120 and they've reduced it by a quarter, if I want to, you should know this, if I wanted to find 1/4 of £120, I divide this by 4. So 120 divided by 4 gives me 30. So that's the reduction. So 120 take away the £30 reduction does give me the £90. Okay, so this always works. Okay, this always works. So if I change the question and let's say something's been reduced by 2/5 and now costs £60. Okay, that 60 represents the remainder. okay, of the 2/5. So we know 5/5 equals 1. So if 2/5 has been taken off, that means that 60 is the remaining 3/5. Okay, because 3/5 plus 2/5 gives us 5/5, which equals 1. So I want to find out what 1/5 of the original price was. So I divide by the numerator, so I divide by 3. So 60 divided by 3 gives me 20. So that's 1/5 of the original price. So I know there's 5/5 in 1, so 20 multiplied by 5 gives me £100, and that was the original price. Okay, so when you're doing percentages, find out what that number represents. Okay, so if something's been reduced by 40%, then 40% from 100 means that this would be 60%. Okay, then you would divide by 6. If this has been reduced by a fraction, then you find out what fraction the amount represents. You then divide it by the numerator, get your 1 part, your 1/5, your 1/7, your 1/11, and then you multiply it by the denominator, because if you've got quarters, there are 4 quarters in 1. If you've got sevenths, there are 7 sevenths in 1. Okay, so if you've got fifths, there are 5/5 in 1. So you multiply it by that and you get your answer. You get back to the original cost. Okay, it really is that simple. Okay, I'm sure your brains are probably telling you it can't be that easy. It really is, otherwise I couldn't do it. Okay, so I hope that helps. These will come up in the exam. Examiners do like this sort of question because they like to see, can you go backwards with calculations? Okay, so I hope it helps, and there will be questions like this in the sequential test. Okay.